welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, after this mini short break, I would say. And with that, we move on to our fourth panel discussion. This topic is extremely interesting, at least for me. With that said, the topic is creating allies to allay fears, engaging men for including and empowering women. This is going to be super interesting. We've got our moderator introducing Vidyotama Sharma, Editor-in-Chief, India Diversity Forum. We have our panelist, Dr. Tanaya Mishra, Global Chief Human Resources Officer, SR Constructions. Raga De Silva, co-founder and director, Speaking Minds, author, LGBT and diversity speaker. Vikas Khoka, Head of Human Resources, Dhanuka Agritech Limited, diversity and inclusion influencer. Rajarshi Ganguly, President and Global HR Head, HR Alchem Laboratories. Amit K. Sharma, CHRO, Volvo Group India. Requesting our moderator, Vidyotama Sharma, to please take over.
Thank you, Ankita. Hello, everybody. So, without making much ado, I'm going to get straight on to starting the session. You all know the topic, creating allies to allay fears, engaging men for including and empowering women. The irony is that we live in a supposedly gender-neutral world where women rule nations, take to skies, lead scientific missions, etc. And yet, it is not possible for any office, any organization, or any nation to say that we do not have gender bias. We do. Openly or subtly, we do discriminate. Despite the level of advancement we have made in bringing more women to offices, we have still not been able to create ideal work environments for them where they feel equal, safe, encouraged, and inspired. The same goes for people and professionals with different sexual orientation. The LGBTQ plus community. The LGBTQ plus community needs to be given due respect, and their members must be made to feel comfortable in being who they are, instead of they living and working in fear of being ridiculed or sidelined. The attitude of judgment never ceases in our society, at our workplaces, in our families. So what is wrong with us as a people, as a workforce, as an organization? Do men have a feeling of entitlement? Or are women being brought up with a feeling of subservience, which later gets difficult to shirk off? If so, why then do women who feel discriminated themselves join in discriminating LGBTQ plus community? It's a vicious circle, isn't it? It's clear that we need to sensitize people at home, at workplaces, and at many other fora. All professionals of all genders bring in their expertise. All need to feel safe, and also all need to be encouraged to move to boardrooms. What is stopping this from happening? Men, organizations, work atmosphere, or women themselves? Or maybe the LGBTQ community itself? We need to look at quite a few questions. So before I go to my first question, I would just like to say that for an equal society, it is not just okay to tell women and LGBTQ community to fight for their rights. It is equally important to engage men in that fight. Let me make this clear. This is not a men-bashing conversation. This is a conversation to look into issues as to where is the divide coming from and what are the corrective measures we need to take. I have a brilliant panel here. As you all know, Rajarshi, Amit, Raga, Vikas, and Tanaya. So Amit, let me begin with you. Why do you think we are still debating in 2021 where we still have to talk about engaging men to enable women to have their rights or get the dignity they deserve? Should it not have happened by now? Since women have been working with the vigor since over 3 decades, if we leave the earlier decades out. Is it because businesses have expanded, technology has made us smarter, and we have advanced, but deep inside, we are stuck in a time warp where it comes to perspectives, attitudes, and working together? Over to you, Amit.
It's a pretty interesting question, and I must say, a very thought-provoking also, that why it's happening in spite of so many years and decades of work being done around it by almost everyone. to me, if you start going deep into it, the root cause lies in the way the socialization happens in the society, and that's where everything starts evolving from. Right from the time a child is born, what kind of parenting a child experiences, especially when you have siblings of opposite genders or different genders, then the way parents treat a male child versus a female child, it's different. They see that very very clearly in terms of, and that's where the feeling of differentiation and the entitlement starts coming in, or you can call it a subservience at one level and a bit of a superiority at another level. That starts coming in. If you look at around us in terms of assistants, the moment we talk about an assistant or in office or a receptionist, you will typically have a picture of a female. You'll hardly have a picture of a male assistant. So much so that when you look at the technology, when the Siri came into existence for the first time, or Alexa came into existence for the first time, it had female voices. Now you can change the voices and change everything. But what was the first thing which happened? Again, it came from the same stereotype about the larger socialization people had, and that's how the products are also formed. And it further, reinforces the same stereotype which is there. If you look at organizations, the way the JDs are crafted, the JDs are crafted in a more very masculine, gender or masculine tone, I would call it. The aggressive, go-getter, assertive, all of that. All the typical macho words we associate. Again, it again reinforces that these things are for men rather than for a female. And many times, either a woman feels that, hey, am I really cut out for this job? Should I even apply for it? Or not. And when you are looking at from a hiring manager perspective, you say, oh, I need all these macho characteristics or masculine characteristics. This would actually need a male person only. So predominantly what we see is our larger socialization is actually working towards this. And it's important that we start dealing with it, to me, at the level of parenting itself. If we are not able to raise our kids as kids who look at men, women equal in terms of the way they see themselves, their father and mother, how they see their father and mother, how they see their siblings, these stereotypes will keep on getting further, strengthened and reinforced. So if they see that it's the mother who's always doing the kitchen, it's the sister who's always helping the mother in the kitchen, and it's the father who's doing all the external work, it's the father who's going to office, it's he who's supporting his father, I don't think so we can ever be able to come out of it. So we'll have to work towards it. And those social stereotypes and the socialization is where we need to really act on if we really want to have a long-term change towards this thinking. Otherwise, in my view, we'll keep on talking about it.
I get you. Brilliant points you brought out, Amit, and I'm taking it further with Vikas now. Vikas, we carry too many biases from our homes and our society, both the angles that Amit just spoke about. We carry all these biases to our workplaces. What biases have you as an HR leader felt as the most common against women and against LGBTQ plus community? And I'll be very happy if you could relate with some examples that you have seen.
So thanks, Vilatarama, and thanks, Amit, for setting the context very rightly, where you traced everything getting back to the home, the roots where we are brought in. All the biases are brought, and let me talk about how the biases are. Biases are typically against color, the kind of choice of games that a child play. It starts from there. This blue color is for a boy and a pink is for a girl, and biases against the success, right, at the workplace in terms of, this role will be successful with a male, this role will be successful with a female, right? Biases against right and wrong in terms of the conditioning of the society, that a female will not be subjected to this kind of a hardship the role evolves without even checking with her. Just condition and not subject that role to that particular female, but make it very gender specific. Capability issues, even without considering what could be challenged as a new normal, typically what is behind. So we go behind, check our experiences, and check all the past records and see, oh, this could be successfully done by a male versus a female. And rightly pointed out by Amit that certain roles, when we talk about, we have certain specific things coming out immediately. Now,
sorry, I'm just holding you back there. I'm sorry, and I want you to continue after that. These roles are defined by you, the HR leaders. They are not defined on their own. So to some extent, I believe you ought to be taking the blame for it. Yeah, please continue.
So without the finger on others, I think I take equally the blame on the ecosystem that I belong to. The only way this could be challenged is push against the wall is very important. And if HR leader or the business leader is not doing that, I think it can't be done by the remaining population in the organization. So that pushing against the wall has to happen. That whenever we have a role, we first make it completely agnostic to a woman. And I was the one who objected once advertisement was raised from my organization on social media saying that we prefer only males for this particular position. And I was the one who got completely removed. In fact, also putting the names out in the CVs, sending the CVs to business leaders without the names, so that they would not get to know which gender is it, right? I'm right now limiting my discussion to women and male, because when it comes to LGBTQ, there's further biases around first the gender, the sexual preference, and the association of that with what capability the person is going to draw. I'm just taking a quick example. I was chatting on my flight with somebody and I just chat that, do you consider LGBTQ fraternity for army or police role? And they said that no, that role cannot be performed by a person who has a sexual preference, which is an alternate preference. And I got to know that the bias is not only existing in the corporate world, but it's spreading around in other parts of society where the capability is considered directly linking to the sexual preference.
I get you. So we have a long way to go. I'll come back to you with further questions. Rajarshi, I'm turning to you. Women in sales and manufacturing have a very different road before them because they face the diversity diversity issue on a very large scale. They are out in field most of the time, meeting all kinds of clients making all kinds of demands. And here, it is not a question of they being in their own workplace. They are vulnerable because they are in some other person's workplace. So they begin with a loss. So I need you to define throw some light on what do these women in sales and manufacturing feel?
Yeah, I think, thank you. I think it's a very pertinent question. And, I think before I answer your question straight, I just want to also kind of extend the remarks made by two earlier colleagues. Some of these, the roles that you are mentioning, sales and manufacturing, I think it's again to do with the societal preferences. In our country, for example, it's perceived that some of these roles, it's difficult for women to do. Of course, these thought processes are changing. However, if I relate with my experience outside India, I mean, in my past company, I was managing several other countries, and including one of them, Russia, for example. There, in my field force, we also were in the pharmaceutical there. 80% of my sales force were women employees. Whereas in an Indian context, to even surpass 5% in a sales force is very difficult. Again, it's to do with, how you do the upbringing, the societal preferences, what kind of role reserved for women, men, etc. So it's just sometimes to do with the society. Coming to India, it's been always a great challenge to attract women in the sales and manufacturing. And you are right. It's not just getting them to the workforce, but also to the, how do they do the job on the day-to-day basis. And I would just take extra one more minute. I remember my experience when, there was a factory where there were no women workmen. I'm talking about several years back. And I took the initiative of introducing women, workmen as well as, other staff in the factory. So we had to do a lot of changes in the infrastructure itself. First, how do you kind of condition the mind of the leadership team, the people around you, create infrastructure, even, simple basic things like restrooms, washrooms, other facilities, so that, once they come and work, they don't feel kind of they are out of place. So it's sometimes easy to attract them, but to retain them becomes difficult. And then over a period of time, as our men also started understanding their needs and made them feel comfortable, we found that it naturally, those myths disappeared. Initially, they were saying that they used to feel that, it's very difficult for them to work in this kind of operation, that kind of operation. Plus, there were also restrictions by law that, you cannot employ women in night shifts, etc. So everybody, said that how can we do that? We operate factories in 3 shifts. So all these conditions were there, but yet despite those, once you start experimenting and people came forward, even I remember, the parents of these, young ladies, some of them were unmarried, they were apprehensive. So we had to bring the parents to show the factory. So, this is something like any other place where your child would feel secure. So, so these thought processes are there, which you want us to overcome. And once it is overcome, then it takes time to build in. Similarly, in sales, in a sales environment, especially in a country like India, where, sales is perceived to be going out and meeting clients or, customers. So there are sales roles which gets operated from the office where you just do cold calls, and all those are easier to handle. So there are safety issues. There are concerns around how would somebody move around late evenings and all. So these worries are more in our country compared when I see some of the other countries which I shared. The statistics are very different there. So once some of these fears are taken care of, then I have seen that, for example, even in my current company, though 2/3 of our workforce is in sales, we find it very difficult to attract women employees in sales. It's just because of these reasons. But once somebody has come and started working, we find, they find it very easy to work with, and they start attracting others. So it's, it's the snowballing effect. Once you start getting someone, they feel comfortable, and your men allies also needs to make them feel comfortable, create ecosystem for them to experience the company better. Once that happens, I think it takes off. But yes, traditionally sales and manufacturing versus some other roles in the organization like research and development, quality systems, corporate offices, we find it challenging to kind of attract women.
Okay, I'll just take it. Sorry, I'll come back to you, but I need to take it further. If I may just say something कि आपने बहुत ज़ख्म कुरेद दिए, because when I began as a journalist, we used to fight for washrooms, and we really used to have a lot of problem. And I remember that when we used to do night shift, and I was staying in a hostel in Nariman Point, and there would be guys on mobile coming and slapping me from behind, and I talking about it in the office, and they'll say, "Oh, madam, or night shift karo," So it is like you're coming in my bastion. So, okay, face the consequences. So I'll just take this further. Raga, I'm coming to you. You decided to come out late about your sexual identity. Ladies and gentlemen, Raga De Silva is representing the LGBTQ community from London. And she decided to come out in her 50s. She was married and had 2 children. So Raga, what was the societal reaction? And reaction at your workplace? I'm very keen to know. Did you feel alienated suddenly when you came out? Did you regret initially that perhaps you made a mistake? Mujhe nahi karna tha, I shouldn't have done it. If yes, what was the behavior of your colleagues?
Vidyotma, thank you. I think I'm one of those rare women who leverage on my age. And there's another one called Mankar, 105, and she's still running. So thank you. And thank you for breaking stereotype as well, because there are 3 gentlemen and 2 women on our panel, and normally it's always ladies first. So thank you for that. And so I'm loving it. Now, I'll just again touch upon what Amit and Vikas also shared before I get on to your question, if you don't mind. Amit, I have twins, and they're 23 years old now, and I have a son and a daughter. And I have brought them up absolutely using a neutral language. I think they represent a future generation, and I think it gives us hope, because I never, differentiated between blue and pink, for instance. Never differentiated that the boy should play, not play with a doll, or boys don't cry. And you can see them in this present state, this generation that they represent, that they are neutral. The language they use is neutral. So I think it starts with us. We forget that men were once boys and then they become men. And so thank you for bringing that out, and thank you. So Vidyottama, I represent, like you said, the LGBT community. And for me, it is about empowering men and women both about, our journeys. And I came out twice, one at the age of 30. I was outed by my mother. Sadly, I was basically pulled out of the closet. And I was in New Zealand at that time. And let me just share that in New Zealand, it's a very liberal society. There is supposedly anti-discriminatory laws. So you can't really call somebody a name or slur. There can be a legal action taken. But I used to work in a very large advertising agency there. And I was poised to be the director in top management and everything. I was winning accolades, awards, as you said. And suddenly one day there were rumors about me having left my marriage and that I was now considering coming out and being with a woman. And suddenly the same management, the same country, which was very liberal, started showing signs of homophobia. They don't say it to your face. They do it passively. Suddenly you're alienated. Suddenly you're not invited to social gatherings. Suddenly you're not invited to meetings. They find excuses to make sure that your promotions are pushed back. And we're talking about New Zealand. So that happened to me. And I was very young at that age. And finally, what happened? Finally, I decided that I didn't want to work with an organization like that. And I left. So they lost a talent. They lost somebody who was actually taking the organization forward. Now, come back to 50. As you said, last year I came out. And I run a business in India. And we have a fairly large office in Mumbai. And my partner is also my business partner. My life partner is also my business partner. Our story came out in Brut, India on a Sunday. Monday morning, we go into office. We have never spoken about our sexuality, just like, as I'm sure you guys never go and say, hey, I'm Tanaya and I'm straight, right? So we don't go around and say I'm Raga and I'm, a lesbian. We walk into the office and there was pin drop silence. You could just feel sniffles and people, there was discomfort. You could just slice it with a knife if you had a knife. It was so, people were uncomfortable. There were whispers around us. When we would go to the kitchen, now remember, we're directors of the company. So it's like all the more difficult for us. And then everybody was just quiet. People were avoiding eye contact with us. It was just very obvious. But in hindsight, I wish I'd done something about it. I did not. I let it go because I was uncomfortable. I was also learning. That's another thing that we have to understand, that a lot of us need to unlearn what we have learned and maybe learn things that we have never learned. Eventually, 2-3 weeks later, one young person from the team came up to us and said, I love your story. You've inspired us and thank you for sharing it. And that's how the ice broke in the office. So my 30s and my 50s were two different experiences. I have felt ghosted. Even now, people ghost us. Our supposedly close, colleagues ghost us, and that's okay. There is no place for people who don't want to know, and it's okay. There are situations where it is uncomfortable. People will talk to us, and the moment they get to know that, oh, you're that Raga who's out, I can sense it. There is a lot of homophobia still in corporate world, whether India, New Zealand, UK, there is, because people are people. Do I have any regrets? No, I have zero regrets because, I think you can't live your life half. The moment I decided to come out with my truth, I decided until then I was incomplete. My story to the world was false. It was not my truth. My capacity to give was also incomplete with Vidyottama. So I think it is important for us to live our truth. There are lots of biases. I mean, all three speakers before me have touched upon those biases.
I'll come to you on that later, yes. Raga. Yes. I'll come to you on the biases later. I'll just thank you so much. And I'm really happy that you could speak so clearly about what the reaction was in the offices in society. That's really, really good. Thank you. And I'm coming to you, Tanaya. Tanaya, you work on projects outside India as well, in remote areas and sometimes under extreme conditions. You tell me that you are bringing in an anti-view here that in more than men, it is difficult to engage women. And I would really want to know, why do you say so?
Look, it is the society, and I completely agree with some of my other speakers. And Raga, it was a fantastic story and very inspiring. But it's also the ecosystem that you are in. For instance, I have operations in Papua New Guinea, which is a small island, up in Australia, which is very difficult to hire people. We have operations in Kuwait where most of it is, it's hot out there. You have restrictions and it's difficult. So I cannot have women employees being engaged in construction and sites. Similarly, I have operations, say, in Dubai, in UAE. So while corporate offices can run operations, hardcore operations or construction of project size is extremely difficult. You will not get. One is the ecosystem that you are in, A. B is also the harsh conditions that one has to adapt to. But I'm not saying that we've not tried. We have gotten women to drive our transit mixers when I was with ACC. Personally, I have fought unions in foreign countries, and we have successfully, it was a room full of gentlemen. I was the only lady, and I've done that in India. I have looked after unions, but I think it's an ecosystem, and it's the environment. It's all of it put together. So it's difficult to point at one particular thing. But yes, in constructions, in hardcore, particularly if you are doing in Uganda, Tanzania, in the Middle East, it's difficult.
Okay. So while I will come back to the questions on why women do not come forward, I'm going back to Amit. Amit, I want you to tell me, what is a man's role in gender equality at workplaces? Is he ready to acknowledge male privilege? Because a lot stems from there. Does he owe his perspective about taking his female or LGBTQ colleagues lightly to the behavior of society towards them when he was growing up? Or is it insecurity of men that the workplace that once a male that was once a male bastion is today encroached upon by professionals of genders who he does not associate with office work? He thinks their place is somewhere else. So I want you to tell me, what is the reason you feel that men feel this kind of discrimination, and also what is their role in solving it? Over to you, Amit.
Yeah, I think fundamentally it stems from the fact of a superiority, which anyway starts the way a child is born, especially a male child, and as I said, he experiences in his growing stage. So this feeling is always there generally, and that's how the very few parents, as Raga said, and really thanks for sharing that, Raga, about your story of parenting, and that's what we need. But I don't think so. That's a very common phenomena. The blue and pink is still very prominent. Dolls and guns are still very prominent. So that's that's one phase of it. The second piece of it is also equally important for us to understand, is that today the opportunities are less. There are more and more people who are vying for those opportunities. And now, look at it from a perspective of psychology, that you have one more set of people coming in who are vying for the same set of opportunities now. So there is this competitive spirit around you, which was earlier a smaller group. And now that competition has further increased, that further adds to that an entire context of, okay, why should we add more people into this pool? Whatever is there, let's try to fight it out in that and then move ahead, because that's where you know how to play the rules of the game. When you are all men's club, you know the rules of the game are different, and when you have a women and a male both together, the rules of a game change. Now, in terms of, and they have not learned the rules of the game when women are also there. And that's where the resistance starts to come in. The conduct, the language, the way you go about doing things. A lot of things fundamentally change. The larger sensitivity which you need to have. So why to bother about building all of that? That to me is a kind of a thinking which is there and which needs to be solved. Now the problem, as you said, now this needs to be resolved also. And how do we solve it? Any system which needs to be solved or any change which you need to bring in always has to come from the system. From an outside, if you'll try to break the system will push it back again. So it's I strongly believe in the Newton's law of motion, and there will be equal and opposite reaction to that. So it can't be really coming from outside. We have to work through the system, bring that change internally, and that's how things will change. It's a long-term process. It's an evolutionary process, but it's an important process. I think that's very critical. That to me is the only way things can really be sustainable. Otherwise, we'll see a change for a short period of time and it'll again come back the moment the pressure is released. We don't want a spring kind of a solution. We want a more sustainable solution. And that's where we need to work there.
Great. Thank you, Amit, for that. And before I take it further, I would like to say in a lighter vein that you said that men normally find it difficult that, more people are coming into the same area of operations which they had, and there are more who will vie for those positions. We women won't mind if men try to come into the kitchens and take over the other chores of the home. We are quite generous in that sense, So I will just take it up. That was just said in a lighter vein. I will take it up with Rajorshi. Rajorshi, after having discussed these above points, it is clear that we need ally support. Men and women will always live together in society and at workplaces. There cannot be a divided world of men and women and people with different sexual orientation. We all have to live together. We have to learn to know and respect and value each other. It is time we create an atmosphere of ally support. So, my question to you, Rajorshi, is why do we have all the gender equality discourses for women? Why do we not include men in these discourses? It's always to women. Rajorshi.
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think, when the world is almost, 50% men and women, I don't see any reason why in the workplace we cannot have, that ratio. In fact, interestingly, yesterday or the day before, I was reading a report which says India only has 20% working women population compared to China, which is one of our neighbors. They have, I think, close to 60%. So I think it's time that we build that ecosystem in all kinds of industry. And I think in order to do that, I think we need to kind of make, as you rightly said, we need the initiative has to also come from the men, because today what has happened is the majority of the C-suite executives are men. And if they can create a good system, policies, framework, mentoring system, recruitment policy, I'm sure, I have seen, as I have shared examples in the past, once you create an ecosystem, you make them a partner in this whole progress, they will own it up. And once the women colleague starts experiencing a workplace in a positive way, I have seen that they start building their career with us. So I think your point is right. It's not just the women; the men will have to also take the initiative, especially in societies like India, where it's a male-dominated society, and for that matter, even some other Western countries. And men can do a lot in kind of make this whole workplace more energetic, having representation from all diverse background, just not the gender diversity, all kind of diversity. Because it's not just about creating the policies, the framework, because which they can sitting at the C-suite. It's also about how do you impact the day-to-day experience? Some of the examples that I gave you, when they go out to work, when they meet customers, when they come to office, when the promotion discussions happen, when you allot certain kind of roles and responsibilities, you have to break those stereotypes, and that's how the progress would happen. That's my take.
Yeah, okay. Here I have, there is a sword hanging over my head, and I have been told that I have next 10 minutes and I have 3 more speakers I need to speak with. Vikas, we need to look, I'll be really happy if you keep your answers brief, so that if I have time, I can ask some 1-minute questions as well. So Vikas, we need to look into the issue of sensitivity, policies, mindsets, HR policies and tasks on hand for the HR department, as Rajorshi was also saying and Amit was also saying, and societal approaches and changes needed at various platforms and levels. You were telling me once that there are hard parts and soft parts of this. Hard part, which is about framing policies, and soft part, part about creating the culture which is more difficult. Vikas, can you explain this, please?
Sure. So I think the context is already set, but let me say that for an HR head, it is two buckets, right? The hard part, I would say, is actually hard, which is the culture. The softer part is the policy, infrastructure, and processes. I think a lot of social media, social media interaction is happening around rainbow colors, LGBTQ, gender neutral policies, etc. Which is, I feel, the softer part because that's easier to be done, right? You can set up infrastructures, you can set up policies, you can invite consultants, set up processes. The tough part is, and if you really look at the gender issues, right, today, in the lighter conversations, what are those jokes or what are those words or what are those jargons which I use which make people uncomfortable? Are those jargons and lighter conversations very friendly to people? And we observed a lot of complaints used to come when people get into a easier zone, like a lighter zone, when they go for an evening coffee or a drink. What kind of conversations are happening? So that is very, very important, and a sensitization has to be created around how we need to conduct outside our boardroom, because boardroom is always governed by rules, right? Everybody follows that. What breaks the rules is when you go out for a drink or when you go out for offsites. What are conversations are happening? Are you making the conversations make every gender feel part of it? And I would not call it a woman or a man, because gender neutrality means we should not call it a man or a woman's world, right? It could be anything. So I think those conversations, we need to have a sensitization. Sensitization has to be brought in by people internally, but change agents have to be created by allies which come from outside. So you help organization to create those change agents to be able to drive that sensitization in the organization slowly and steadily, not necessarily governed by posh rules. Because you can't take a stick and teach that.
And meet them.
It has to be slowly and steadily built into the culture how conversation should be.
Yeah, sure. Thanks. Raga, you have been very bold in the step you took and the way you have handled the situation. And I do understand and agree with you that most of us are still not aware about how can these situations be handled. So here from as a first person account, I would want you to say, what do you expect the HR managers, the organizations and the society at large when it comes to working professionals of the LGBTQ community to do to make the situation better?
See, with Jyotima, we do othering, right? We always talk about society as it's somebody else. We are society. It starts with us. And that othering we have to stop first and foremost. I think each one of us is responsible. It's not just the LGBTQ community that we should be talking about. Like Vikas has been saying, it has to be everybody and anybody, because we're talking about a diverse and inclusive society. See, sadly for all of us, we come from a very complex environment. Our homes are so different. We come from a home, we follow different religion, different faith, the food we eat, who we worship. We bring that into our workplace. And the workplace is suddenly completely different at times. And depending upon your own biases or your own upbringing, you kind of have a reaction to what happens around the workplace. So that it's quite complex. It's not as simple as saying, chalo, ye button ghar pe rakho, and this button you bring to your office. We have to start at an individual level where organizations understand that we are different people. So I don't think that it is the responsibility of any one, it's a collective responsibility. We have to start with ourselves. We have to, I don't know, in New Zealand, what really worked, in UK, what really works is an anti-discriminatory law. So, law is something all of us are scared of law. All of us believe in the legal system. So maybe there are those things that we need to do where at least people will not abuse you, ridicule you, give you slurs, because there will always be fear. They know that there is action that can be taken. I know of companies, I do a lot of talks where there are champions set up who you can go to if there was a problem, that somebody abused you, discriminated against you. You could go to that person and you could talk to them. And they make sure that people know that there are consequences to those actions. And I think that is where we have to start.
Great. Thank you, Raga. And you have put certain things in the very right perspective. Thank you. Most of all the speakers are doing a brilliant job, and I wish we had more time. But due to paucity of time, I'm coming to Tanaya now. And if possible, we will just take about 1 or 2 minutes of wrapping up. Tanaya, quite often I feel that instead of bettering their performance, women get into proving themselves better than men. That I am better. They get into this proving game, as if men were the benchmark, which I feel is not right. Men are not the benchmark. You are your own benchmark. So Tanya, what do you think is a woman's role in gender equality at workplaces? If she feels that men are the benchmark for her growth, she will always fall short of achievements because she will always look up to them. Is when she's trying to prove a point. So is she caught in a web of habits, and or do you think that the society has a lot to create those benchmarks for her, and she need to get out of that mood? Tanaya.
See, one has to understand that, when you're going to work, there is already a benchmark because you have your peers who are gentlemen. So for a woman, it is that much harder because this mud slandering, she is doing well because can be anything. And it's really disgusting because, as senior professionals, when you're wanting to go somewhere, there will be somebody else who's slandering your name just because you've been working very hard and you speak straight, you call spade a spade. And so it becomes very disheartening for women leaders. Even when you want to, while we are talking about, having kind of, it's a kind of a written, unwritten rule where we want more and more women. But when senior lead women want to go and apply, there is nobody taking them. I have so many women friends who have been executive vice presidents, I will not name organizations, who are sitting at home. So there are very qualified women, but unfortunately people, while they say something, they do something else. And that unfortunately doesn't match. Now, one thing which I want to also mention is, when children are growing up right now, the young boys, are feeling very discriminated because they say, oh, where will I get in? Because first there is the gentleman, the woman category, then there is the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe. So where am I going with all of this? So, it's a very different kind of, I don't think there is something that there's a mold to say that, that this is how it's going to work. But right now there is systemic thinking which is necessary for us as a society, which needs to impact the organization and the ecosystem that we are in. So a lot of things to be said, but I know there's shortage of time.
Yeah, I am really sorry to all the panelists. You all have been wonderful speakers, but I think we need to wrap up because there are many more other speakers waiting to come online. I would want to thank you all for being a wonderful panel. And I just agree with all of you, if I can sum up, that we all have to work together as a society. We all have to forget who's a woman, who's a man, who is a gay, who's lesbian, who's transgender. We are all human beings, and if we can put that together and the organizations can become a little more sensitive, creating that sensitization process, as all have spoken, I believe it will not happen in a day as has been said, but perhaps kahin to shuruaat karna hai, let's take the first step. Let's try and make a difference. And I'm sure the other steps will get clearer as we go along. So thank you very much. And I'm handing this over to Ankita. Thank you.